Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lauren Lake, and I'm one of the co-founders here at Bridgit. We build workforce planning solutions for the construction industry, and we first launched our product about 6 years ago after hearing from many, many contractors just about the struggles that they had with trying to become more strategic around their workforce planning, doing a lot of that work manually. And with the topic of AI now at the forefront, it's been really exciting to think about what that next generation of workforce planning will look like in the industry. And to have that discussion, I'm so happy to be here today with Peter Cotugno from W.E.O'Neil. So, Peter, I'll pass it over to you to give a quick intro, and then we're going to hop in and I'm going to ask you all sorts of questions about workforce planning,
Right.
about AI, about how you're thinking of all of these new topics, and it's going to be a great discussion.
Right on. Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Cotugno, Vice President of Operations for W.E.O'Neil Construction. I'm out on the West Coast. I oversee our operations for Los Angeles, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. I started with W.E.O'Neil, oh gosh, I'm going to date myself, 26 years ago as an intern. I've held every operational position from intern to Vice President of Operations. We started using Bridgit, a few years ago now, and it's been great. The way that we used to do resource tracking and resource planning was via an archaic spreadsheet, and moving to the solution has been awesome. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. And Lauren, I will pass it back to you to take it from here.
Okay, amazing. So I'm going to pepper you with a bunch
Oh
of
man.
questions for the next 40 minutes or so. And as Daniel said, anyone who's live with us right now, feel free to send your questions in for Peter, and we will get to those in the Q&A. But first, Peter, before we even get into the topic of I think maybe I just want to hear a little bit more about what strategic workforce planning and that transition has looked like for you at W.E. O'Neil over the last couple of years. You mentioned moving from that archaic spreadsheet. Do you mind
Yep.
just walking everyone through what that transformation has looked like, maybe what the results have been? And I think that'll set us up
Sure.
nicely to talk about where we go from here.
Sure. Workforce planning has always been critical for us. It's always led to some great conversations, and it's always led to us, diving into certain, we'll say, attributes to make sure that we're planning properly. However, we haven't always been efficient with it. I mentioned before that we had an archaic spreadsheet. People had to go in there one at a time to update. It was really based on geography and project. And then kind of in the background, we would talk about those other things when planning for where we want to place folks, what's best for the organization, what's best for them. Um, we always knew that we wanted to have a system in place that allowed us to look at, you know, history, longevity, title, role that they want to be in, geography. Like there's a whole list of things that, we couldn't necessarily tackle in an efficient way previously. So, migrating over to a system that allows us to, one, share information efficiently with all the folks that need to be in the system has been great. Because it used to be that I would have to actually communicate with people individually. I'd get emails from people, where's so and so, how's so and so doing this? Excuse me. How are we going to elevate so and so based on their experience? And having a system in place that allows people to get into the same data set has been, just amazing to allow communication to happen seamlessly. However, there's still this manual process that we go through when taking roles and titles and placing people. And I'm as excited as you are to see where we go for the next step and how we can use AI to help us with this.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head there. We see workforce planning as such a great application for AI because just as you said, there are so many different variables that go into it. And so even if you're using a software solution already, there still is some manual work, and we'll get into that in terms of all of the different combinations you want to look at. And ultimately, you are limited without AI as to how many of those permutations could anyone possibly manually create and compare. And so we are really excited for this next kind of future of workforce planning where we see it being very AI enabled and actually allowing you to look at many, many, many combinations of scenarios and run all sorts of analyses on things like all of the different combinations you talked about to really understand the best deployment of the workforce. Before we even get into AI in terms of workforce planning, though, maybe just talk to us a little bit about what AI has looked like at W.E. O'Neil
Sure.
overall. How are you sort of embracing it? How are people
Yeah.
discovering new applications or new things?
Yeah.
What has that looked like thus far?
Um, I'm going to add a big qualifier that I'm not the CIO, but I am going to share a little bit with how we use AI. We as an organization culturally are I'd say we're pretty good about letting people explore and letting folks come up with great solutions. You strive to hire great people because they can advance your business, and putting them necessarily in a box isn't necessarily going to be great for anyone. So, I feel like our IT group has done a good job of giving us kind of the bumpers of where we can go with AI. We're not told you have to use this exact system or you have to go in this exact direction. But we are given some guidelines that protect us as an organization. And as long as we stay within those guidelines, we can go and explore. And we have passed that out to our folks, and our folks have done an amazing job coming up with different, we'll say, things or processes where they've used AI as a tool to help streamline some processes. I'll give you just like a couple examples. We used to spend hours and hours and hours doing contract reviews. And while it's super important to get into a contract review, we have found using AI to help that review has just allowed us to be a little bit more efficient. In fact, extremely efficient when doing contract reviews. Um, one of the other ways that I've seen us use AI, um, you know, putting proposals together. Oftentimes, we have many different departments contributing to a proposal, many different write-ups that are coming together. It could be operations, it could be marketing, it could be scheduling, it could be logistics. And what we notice is when narratives were coming together, they're either in a different tense or a different tone, or just the authors, are different, so they have a different style. And we have found that if you kind of give it all to AI, they can make it sound like it's coming from one writer, which was very, very efficient for us. And we're dabbling in other stuff. We found that we can use AI, and this is a recent one. We just wanted to see if it could do it. We're always trying to give efficiencies and best value to our clients. So they often ask us for, value engineering ideas. What can we do to be more efficient? We actually dropped a set of plans in AI and said, hey, give us some value engineering ideas. And I was very curious to see what it would come back with. And it came back with some amazing stuff. So I think the possibilities are really endless. We keep exploring, and as we find great ideas and we can ingrain it in the way that we do business, we adopt it and move forward with it.
So it sounds like it's very much led by different individuals who are finding their own use cases of, okay, here's something I'm going to go try, see how it works. And then how are they sharing
Yeah,
that back with the rest of the
that's a good
company?
question.
Yeah, if they find something that's working well.
So I'll focus on operations just because that's my world. And we break we'll call it functional groups up. Engineers, project managers, superintendents. They are broken up with their own councils that are leaders of their peer groups, and they share with each other. So roundtables, quarterly meetings, and they use those forums to share knowledge. So different projects will take away different tasks to explore a path or explore a new tool, or how can we use AI to do this on my project based on the life cycle where we're at in a project. They'll test it. They bring it back to their functional group. They'll present it. They talk about it. Oh, wow, this is great. This is super efficient. Maybe everybody should do this. And then it will kind of move up to the executive level. We'll talk about it, at a greater scale, and then see if it's something that we want to adopt either regionally, nationally, and make it possibly a policy then going forward.
So it sounds, yes, very grassroots and really encouraging individuals or teams to test different, I guess, use cases or processes and then share those back. Um, and what tools are people mostly using? Is it ChatGPT? Is
Uh,
it others?
It's chat. So it's pretty wild. I thought that we'd be digging into or find, I shouldn't say that. I think that chat is probably the most accessible for everybody. So everybody is gravitating towards it. But I mean, I don't know, like every couple of weeks something new comes out and they find a new system to go try for AI or ingrain it or test it a different way. But I'd say for the most part, it's chat.
And is that so each person has their own license
Mhm.
and
So
then
it,
okay.
yeah, and we leave it up to the employees. So if somebody really wants to get into it and do the paid membership, I think it's like $10 a month or something like that. Um, sure, let's try it. If you want to try it, let's do it. And that's how we do it.
And you've talked, so this kind of ties in terms of sharing, looking at, okay, what is one region doing? Is that something that we would want to deploy or encourage more nationally? I know when we've talked before, you've shared sort of this one team mindset that you're really trying to encourage at W.E. O'Neil, really across the board in terms of technology adoption, but also in terms of workforce planning, making
Yes.
sure that the company has sort of one shared language for how you're viewing this process, how you are deploying resources, how you're sharing between different groups. Do you mind just sharing a little bit more about what that sort of one team mindset looks like for you as a company and maybe what some of the challenges have
Uh,
been? Because
it's
that is a big shift from operating more in a more siloed way.
Yeah, it's been tricky. The way that, W. O'Neill originally took hold, we started in Chicago in 1925 and then ventured out and started satellite offices. And those satellite offices were autonomous companies. While they were part of the W. O'Neill family, they really operated independently. And there was a parent company over the top that really just did accounting. Um, and what that led to is, it led to some of the companies doing things with their own subtle nuances and ways. And we tried our best to come together every year. We have a program called WeOcon. We come together, we share best practices, we share knowledge. And sometimes that led to some efficiencies and changes in systems in the various regions. But over the last couple of years, our CEO John Finn has made it an important strategy to shift to a one team mindset for a whole host of reasons. And one of them being efficiencies. We have found that we had folks doing the same things in different regions when they didn't necessarily need to. And John has done a great job setting up, what he calls them COEs, Centers of Excellence. And so, each of our departments has a COE. So there's an ops COE. All the ops folks from around the country get together. We have strategies and initiatives that we put together. When there's a best practice out of a region that we want to share with the rest of the country, we then funnel it through that COE to share back out to the rest of the country. And it's been great in that we have now a vehicle to do this sharing of knowledge. Um, but it's still tricky because it's change, and change is hard. It's like it just is. And while everybody may think they might have the best system, or it's really inefficient to change, it can be tricky at times. But overall, it's been great because it's led to some really good efficiencies. And we're still, nothing's perfect. We're still working on it, but we have a great system in place.
And on the workforce planning side specifically, I know we've worked with you to look at all of the data and where
Yeah.
are the different systems tying together, and how can we encourage sort of that shared approach to workforce planning. I do think that's a really big challenge that most of the companies we work with are facing because they're going from a very regional or divisional approach where each group is doing their own resource
Yes.
planning in their own way, using their own systems, and all of a sudden you're trying to tie all of these different data sets together. So I know for you,
Yes.
you're pulling in pursuits and you're pulling in information from CMIC, and that
Yes.
means that all of those systems, the data has to be clean
Yes.
and approached in the same way. Anything you would share on that? Because I do
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's core to AI. If we don't have good information in the system that's set up in a standard way, then the
Yes.
AI layer on top will not be all that useful.
This is a really good point. When I was asked to help implement Bridgit for the organization, at least in California, one of the things I wanted to make sure of is that we didn't have another data set that got confusing. And what I mean by confusing is having multiple sets of data that we're trying to check to see what's true. And I knew that, our people data was stored in one spot, so you could get all your people information out of ADP and CMIC, and our project information, whether if it was a pursuit, it came out of Uninet for us, and if it was a project, it came out of CMIC. So I knew all the people and the project information was out there. So there was no reason to have a standalone database that we're trying to maintain. So we did create an automation to bring people information in, project information in, and then allow Bridgit to be the means of tying everything together and then sharing it back out to everybody else. But what was really tricky about it is we had to make sure that people were using the systems, the true source systems, that they were using them correctly so that it fed our system properly within Bridgit. So it wasn't as much as it was tricky in implementing just Bridgit because it was a new system, but it was also, diving into the peripheral systems to make sure that we're using those properly so that data was correct coming in. Now, one of the other things that was tricky is that we were using Bridgit in different databases in the regions. And one of the big appeals to me with Bridgit was not only being able to see and have transparency with respect to resource availability within California, but I wanted to see resource availability nationally because there were times where a different region might be slow or might be busy. And honestly, the way that it was communicated was somebody would send an email out saying, "Hey, we need a little help in California. Is anybody slow in these positions?" And it was like super inefficient. And just recently, we have now merged our databases together into one Bridgit database nationally with all the regions. And so there's visibility now on all the resources, which I'm super excited about because it will allow us, once again, back to the one team mindset. It will allow us to be able to share resources and give people opportunity across the country as opposed to having being siloed and not being able to see the folks that are coming available.
Yeah, the challenge of resource sharing or the opportunity around resource sharing, I'd say is one of the main reasons companies end up looking for a workforce planning solution.
Yes.
Because we hear this problem all the time of we just hired a whole bunch of people in Dallas because we
Right.
were so short-staffed, and then we realized 6 months later we had a whole bunch of people who were underutilized in another region, and we missed the opportunity to share that knowledge or share those individuals. We've definitely heard sort of the email approach. We've heard people say that they actually cold call different offices,
Yeah.
trying to find somebody that has a specific skill set or has worked on a specific type of project before because they don't have anyone within their region. But I think it is a lot easier said than done. There's a lot of sort of cultural change. People want to keep their team members and the people that they know well close. It can be hard to change from sort of that regional, keep uh, close ties on everything to a more open sharing sort of environment. Have you noticed any of those challenges? I think at W.E. O'Neil, you have a lot of cross communication that's happening between the different regions, which I would imagine helps foster those relationships. But anything you can add there?
Yeah, it's a really good point. A lot of organizations, ourselves included, way back in the day, had kind of a siloed effect. And you can look at silos different ways. It could be silos regionally, and it could also be, project-based silos. So you may have an executive that has a certain book of work underneath them, and they have like their people, and that's a real problem. And while some may not see it a problem, we saw it as a problem from a couple different reasons. One, those silos started doing things kind of I'll say their own way, and they start to kind of meander off. And it's not just from a technical perspective, it's also culturally. We started to see that there were some cultural silos, and that's not great when you're trying to share resources and you're trying to have the same culture throughout an organization. So we made it a point, especially regionally, to mix teams up. So when a project is over, we make our best effort to mix teams up. One from a technical perspective that we want everybody to do things in a similar way. Sharing of best practices gets passed along that way as well, and culturally things get passed along as well. So there you have the mindset already of folks not wanting a silo regionally because they want to mix things up. Now I feel like we're starting to grow into it nationally. And I think having the COEs in place and having the visibility with our resources nationally, I think we're going to start to see things mix a little bit more. It's a little bit more challenging because you have to move folks around, and moving folks around throughout the country is a little bit more difficult than moving folks around regionally. Uh, but at least we can give them the opportunity, which is great.
Yes, and sort of understand the different trade-offs that you'd be making with those different options. Do we hire more people, or are
Yep,
there individuals that, do want this opportunity, or it would make sense for them, even
definitely.
given maybe some of these downsides?
Definitely.
For anyone who doesn't know on the call, we are developing our own AI-enabled features within Bridgit. We did just launch what we call Ask Bridgit. So it's our own version of a chat experience within the product where you can actually go and query your own information. So you could say, tell me who has experience on this type of project, or who has Peter worked with before that would be a good fit for XYZ. And the reason for that was we'd heard so many comments of people saying, we have so much information in here and we want faster ways to get to the nitty-gritty. And adding this AI chat has really opened the doors for what people can do. And we're seeing people ask all sorts of different things. And we're learning and getting smarter with how we can prepare and give answers back. So that's been really exciting. But Peter, I know you've talked about some of your AI dreams, and some of the directions that you want to go or you could envision going in the future. Right now, I would say we've laid the stepping stones for an AI-driven workforce planning product. We're adding more features to really take out some of that manual work. But future state, we see that becoming more and more AI-driven, and we have some exciting things in the works. But Peter, if you had a magic wand, is there anything that you wish the system could do for you that right now you
Yes.
are still doing manually?
Yes. And I want you to know that I'm not asking for the system to do this because we're lazy. I'm asking for the system to do this because I feel like there's so many different permutations and variables that need to be considered that us as humans miss it. And we don't miss it on purpose. We get busy, and that sometimes causes us to miss things. So if I had a magic wand, um, honestly, at a macro level, I would want AI to check my assignments for all of my projects quarterly and tell me, hey, based on these variables, you are staffing what I would consider to be the most efficient, or give me suggestions saying, no, based on these reasons, you're probably not staffed the most efficient. Here are some ideas for you. Let me give you some examples. Every organization probably weights the variables on how they staff a job differently. So if I could have a system that would allow me to place a different weight on a certain variable, so it could be travel distance, experience in that position, experience in that market sector, experience with that role. It could be personality. We do a personality assessment, and I'd want the system to overlay the personalities and tell me if it's ideal team fit. And I would weight all those differently, and then I'd have it come back to me and tell me, hey, based on these reasons, this is probably not the best setup. You may want to move X, Y, and Z, move this person over to here for these reasons. Um, that would be super helpful for me.
And would you want, so we've heard this concept before. People have said they want sort of a sliding bar to
Mhm.
say, okay, now I want to look at if I optimized everything for commute distance.
Hmm.
Now, what would that look like? And what would
Hmm.
the sort of trade-offs be there? Okay, now I've placed this person who's only 5 miles from the job site. I'm really optimizing around their commute, but the downside there is they've never worked on this type
Hmm.
of project before, or they've only been at the company for a year, and now we have, a very low company tenure on this job overall. And is that something you're willing to sort of make that trade-off on? And people have said, I want to take a look at if I optimized everything for commute. Okay, now I want to optimize everything for employee growth. I want to make sure that
Hmm.
people are getting well-rounded experience. So do I have people that have, never done a data center project? Am I giving them
Right.
opportunities to take on that type of work and round out their experience? So would you imagine sort of being able to slide those dials around
Yeah.
essentially and then have the system spit out
Yes.
all of the different possibilities?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's ever a one size that fits all because depending on your business, where it's at, and what your needs are, I feel like the level at which you would adjust each of those scales or optimization level, it would change. And I would love to have the ability to move them around based on our needs. But yeah, that would be absolutely amazing.
And do you look at tenure right now
Yes.
when you're building teams?
Yes, that is a huge variable. So I shouldn't say this, but I have a spreadsheet off to the side where I track team tenure, and if it's below a certain level, it's not like a red flag, but I'd say it's like maybe a yellow flag. Like, hey, let's dive in a little bit deeper. Let's make sure culturally, they know the WEO way of doing things. Let's just double check technically that everybody's got, all the technical skills honed in the way that they should. It doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. I'm sure they'll be very successful, but it's just an indicator to just check in a little bit deeper.
And you're looking at company tenure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I am looking at company tenure, but if I had AI, I'd probably look at it a few different ways. But my handy dandy spreadsheet only does so much.
Yes. We're starting to surface more of those data points within the product. But I agree, AI will take it to the next level where you can actually start to run those different scenarios, compare the different options. Right now, you'd be able to see all of those components, but you would have to go and look at each one, sort of one
Mhm.
off, and do your own comparison. But we do hear a lot of company tenure coming up, people calling what they refer to as the rookie ratio. So looking at,
Yep.
what percentage of people on this project or on this team have been at the company less than 1 year or less than 2 years? And how do I make sure that I'm balancing that with people that have been at the company for longer, or looking at that based on industry tenure as a secondary sort of measurement? How long have they worked in the industry in this type of role? So it is sort of one of those variables. I agree. It's not the be all end all, but one of the things to balance. And so when you're doing that sanity check, and you're kind of saying, okay, I wish AI could, every quarter go in and run this sort of scenario for me and make sure that I'm still optimized. Are you looking at any financial metrics as part of that?
Um, Yes and no. So, depending on the size of the project could dictate the experience of the folks that we want on the project. It's all related to risk, right? Larger project, larger risk, smaller project, smaller risk. So I'd look at it from that standpoint. Typically on a smaller job, we can have, tenure and position could be a little bit lower because it might be somebody that's breaking through into their next level up. And, the way to do that is, maybe on a smaller project. But, on a larger project with larger dollars, we want to make sure we have some seasoned folks out there. So, we would definitely tie dollars into it.
And when you're looking at sort of all these components, one of the other things that we've heard is I don't just want to optimize and run AI scenarios based on the active projects that I have. Like that's definitely a huge component, but I also want to make sure that I'm setting myself up to bid on projects that make
Yes.
sense for those who will be available, 6 months from
Yes.
now, 12 months from now. We've heard a lot of contractors say they've called it blind bidding, feeling like they're bidding projects blindly, not really knowing if they have the right team members to take it on, and then sort of scrambling and saying, okay, if we win the project, then we'll figure out who this team is. Um, I do see a world where AI could really help with that to look at, okay, here's everything that's active right now, and here's, the top three recommendations for how to staff those projects. And then also based on all the projects that you're pursuing and given the team members and their experience and their tenure and all those things who will be available at these time intervals, here's the projects you should, pursue more aggressively, or maybe you shouldn't pursue because you're not set up to be profitable on them. Is that where your mind goes?
Lauren, that would be
Well,
amazing. I'm not saying that we bid blindly, but sometimes it feels like one eye's closed. And what I mean by that is Bridgit plays a significant role in our pursuits. And when we do our pursuit meetings every week, we pull Bridget up, we look at scenario planning, we look at our over unders at a very high level, just at a very high level to see where our staffing levels are at, when we could take work on. But it's that high level. It's like it's surface level there. All the different permutations and variables that you just mentioned before to help us be more focused in what we should go after, that would be amazing. Sometimes we don't have that luxury, it's sometimes it's what's out there, is what we need to go try to hunt. But sometimes, we have an option. And if we could use some objective data that's telling us, based on your experience, who's coming available, project sizes they could handle, and it could help us make a more objective decision on what we should pursue, that would be great.
also being able to look at here's how you've staffed similar projects in the past.
Hmm.
And so if you're going to take on a project of this type, of this budget,
Hmm.
here's the last five similar projects you've done. And this was the overall sort of staffing plan that ended up being built, and then being
Yes,
able to essentially project that for you so you're not going in and trying to, figure out how many people do I need for this project.
that's
You can
right.
start to get some at least rough numbers from it.
Definitely. If Bridget could provide that, and if AI could help Bridget to provide that, that'd be great. We already use something similar. We know our efficiency metrics that we want on projects based on size and market type, and that helps to dictate, what we want to do on projects going forward. But if we could see it in a more with more clarity through Bridget, that would be great.
And do you mind defining a little bit, just for people who are on the call, what is that efficiency metric that you're
Sure.
looking at?
Yeah, so it's efficiency based on how much revenue people can handle. I shouldn't say handle. Yeah, I should say it's how much revenue a person can handle per month. So it's a dollar value of revenue per person per month. We know that if the revenue or our efficiency metric gets too high, that we're probably understaffing a project based on history. And then all the problems with understaffing comes with it. You have folks that are not happy, you have quality issues, you have all the bad things that could happen. Or then conversely, you can see something that's not efficient at all based on our historical metrics, and then that tells us that we're probably overstaffing a job, and then you run into fee erosion and people that might not be satisfied because they're not getting the opportunities that they need to perform the work that they need to perform out in the field.
We've heard that same sort of efficiency metric process from other companies as well. Some people say they define it as for their right sizing
Mhm.
approach to making sure that, okay, does this team still make sense given the revenue that this project is bringing in? Sometimes people have said, we staffed the project a year ago, and now, given the phase and the stage of the project, it no longer makes sense to have this team. And so, how can we make sure that we're staying on top of it? I think that could be part of that sort of quarterly audit, uh,
Definitely.
where you're making sure that those efficiency metrics stay in line as the project progresses.
Yes. Yeah, and we know the efficiency that we want based on the phase of the project as well. So just like, in Bridget, if we can add the phases in there, it could then tell me where my efficiency should be and how I should staff it throughout the phases.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, in terms of just taking a step back, less so specific to workforce planning, but if you were to think about AI overall, it can be a very daunting topic and it's moving so quickly. I think a lot of people don't know necessarily where to start. Any advice that you would give to other contractors or other individuals in the industry who are early on in their AI journey? And
Yeah,
I feel like you do a really great job of making things very practical. You're not coming at it from a, techie perspective, and so I think it's relatable for people. So anyway, anything that you would recommend or advice?
I'm definitely not the AI guru. I'm not that individual, but uh-oh, Lauren, are you locked up or am I?
Oh, I think it just froze for a second. Oh, all
That
good.
might have been me. I'm sorry. That could have been my internet. I apologize. So I was qualifying my lack of knowledge of AI. So I'm definitely not the AI guru, but I understand process, and I look at AI like it's another tool, and just like anything we do in our industry, you have another tool. So how do you insert it into your process, and how do you get it through the maturation of the R&D development process? And I'm sure there are so many different avenues of AI that we haven't touched yet. But, like I was touching on earlier, culturally, how we tackle a new tool is we usually allow things to take a grassroots hold. We don't necessarily force it down from the top. We allow the brilliant individuals we have in our organization to figure out how can they use it the most efficiently. And that's kind of how I was raised in this company as a project engineer. I had folks, 20 years older than me looking at me going, how would you do this? And it was great because I look at it in a way where they're like, I never would have thought to do it like that. And so we try to keep that same culture. So if I had to give advice to somebody, I would say try to look at a different way to innovate. And if you can let the younger generation look at the process that you have in place and allow them to come up with your innovation, your innovative approach. Yes, you can put the bookends on it and tell them, hey, you can use these search engines, or this is what you're allowed to share and not allowed to share. But let that younger generation, they're so smart. I mean, it's unreal how smart that younger generation is. Let them come up with a great idea and present it to you, and then see if you want to use it.
I think that's great advice. It is becoming second nature. I feel like to those that, have sort of grown up around it, my kids, it's their first thought is to go ask ChatGPT. They
Yeah,
wouldn't even think of anything else.
yeah.
So, anyway, that is perfect. We are right on time, and that is a great segue. Daniel, you're back with us to open it up to Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for such a great conversation already. And I know I've seen messages coming through. I know everyone's really enjoyed the conversation so far. We have a few questions that have come in. I think this first one is for the AI guru Peter, or no, maybe you said not the guru. Sorry about that. No, just kidding. The question is, any advice for internal AI pushback?
Oh, wow. So we've seen some of that within our own organization, where folks may have used AI and it wasn't giving them the proper data or the proper, I should say, true data back. And it happened to me as recently as yesterday. And honestly, the only way that I was able to squash that, or I've seen people squash it, is by showing them a use case where it did work very well, helping to get the folks bought in. I don't think necessarily forcing it upon anybody is going to get them to buy in, but if you can show them that you can make their life a little bit easier and a little bit more efficient, I think they're more inclined to buy into it.
I like it. That's a great recommendation. Um, Anything you want to add, Lauren? I know that's something we've been chatting about at Bridget as well.
I know a few people have said that sometimes starting with things just in your personal life, like organizing a vacation, trying to find a restaurant nearby, like asking, almost playing around with AI from that lens can sometimes be a little bit easier to kind of ask easier questions maybe or get into it and then start to apply what you're seeing work or not work in more of the work business sort of context. I know I have found it so helpful for doing things like planning a vacation itinerary and not having to read all of the different vacation blogs or whatever. So just silly things, but things that would otherwise take a lot of your own personal time. Sometimes that can be just a way to see a quick win and maybe a little bit less daunting in a way to try it.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Great recommendation. I think this next question that came in is for Lauren. When can we have access to the current AI features in Bridgit? I requested access a few weeks ago. Someone really wants to get started with this.
Yes, it is coming very soon. We are doing the final few beta tests over the next, honestly, days, weeks. And so stay tuned. We will let you know, but it is very much right around the corner. Just wanting to make sure we polish the few final things so that it's ready for you. But it is ready to go.
Cool. All right, this one's for Peter. You mentioned tracking a revenue per person metric. You talked a little bit about that. How did you initially establish this benchmark? And how has that that metric kind of changed the way that you make staffing decisions?
That's a really good question. And I recently had that same question with one of our other offices yesterday, who doesn't necessarily have benchmarks yet. So, I can't tell anybody what their benchmark should be. Your benchmark is based on how you want to run your business and how you want to be successful on your projects. What I can say is that I have years of data where we've been tracking our benchmarks for efficiency, and that's allowed me to create a small database based on project size and project type to know that I shouldn't say tackling, that I'm staffing and bidding a project properly based on what we've done in the past and where we want to go going forward. We do have to adjust it yearly based on inflation. I can't say that a project because it's revenue per person per month. So as things cost more, that number's going to go up a little bit so that we maintain the same efficiency. If we never adjusted it, then our efficiency would be way off.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for answering that question. We had another one just come in, I think also for you, Peter. When you first started using ChatGPT and other similar tools for value engineering and other items like that, did you have any data concerns, maybe on the IT or cybersecurity members of your
Yeah.
team?
So our IT side did a good job of telling us, what permissions and what we had to set up such that our information wasn't shared with anybody else and that it was kept just to us. So I feel like our IT department gave us the right parameters to keep things out of the public realm and that we could still get the data that we were looking for. The other cool thing that it did when I put those drawings in is I asked for it to do a constructability review as well, and I was floored at the responses it gave back on constructability.
That's really cool. I actually have a follow-up question. I think that slots in really nicely to kind of what you were just talking about. There's another question about, using ChatGPT for value engineering, and they just asked, how do you validate the recommendations, or how are you making
Oh,
sure?
that's a great question. So it's not like you take it, just like anything with ChatGPT, you don't just take the information, copy and paste it, and send it out and saying, this is what we're going to do. It's meant to get you, 70, 80% of the way there and kind of get the creative juices flowing. But it's on us to validate that it's right or wrong. If we just trust it as being 100% accurate, we are making a huge mistake. But it does a really good job of giving us inspiration.
Yeah. That's a great thing to remember. Going back to Lauren's example of using tools like this for planning a vacation, I did this a couple months ago and it worked great until it took us to a place that had been closed for 2 months.
Oh no.
And then we were just like, okay, well, there's that plan. But everything
Right.
else is great. But yeah, there's that validation part
Yeah.
that, you don't want to get egg on your face when it
Right.
comes to a client or something like that. Um, I have one last question here that I think is a good one to end on, and probably both of you can kind of weigh in on this one. Um, you were discussing building teams according to tenure as one of the factors. What other factors are you considering when you're trying to make sure that your teams are well balanced? And what happens when you just don't have enough experienced people to go around?
Yeah, that's tough. So, you had a couple of questions there. First, other factors that we look at, commute is one of the biggest ones. We want to make sure that folks have a sane commute if we can do it. We also don't want folks passing each other on the freeway. The last thing we want is for people to give each other a high five driving down the 405. We'd like it if we could keep it as, commute friendly as possible, but we also know that's not possible. You have that, then you have project size. So can the folks that we're assigning to a project handle based on their tenure and time and position, tenure and position, can they handle a project that size? Then we're also looking at the market sector. Have they done work in that market sector and are they capable of it? But then like kind of is as important as commute is it good for the growth of that employee? And we want folks to grow. We want people to learn. I want area folks to experience different areas so eventually they can see an entire project and run an entire project. All of those decisions go, all those factors come into play when making a decision. Can we weigh all of those every time? Not always. Sometimes there's competing interests and outside influences that make us have, a hard conversation with somebody and say, hey, this is going to be a longer commute. I'm sorry. I want to tell you for these reasons why. And we have to have those hard conversations sometimes. What do I do when it's not ideal? I think that's the question that you asked is the follow on to it. That's going into it eyes wide open. So you can't always staff a job, in the perfect optimization, but you can educate yourself on how you're staffing the job. And if it's not perfect, you're then educated up front on what the risks are. And then it's on us as leaders to figure out ways to best mitigate those risks. How do I check in with that team differently? Do I set up my one-on-ones differently? Are there KPIs that I should be looking at differently and more often to make sure we're not getting off track? Stuff like that, dig in a little bit deeper.
I love that. A lot of great recommendations there. Lauren, anything you wanted to add on that topic?
That was a great answer, Peter, and very similar to what I've heard others share as well. One company that we work with, they did some interesting studies looking at turnover on their projects and trying to predict essentially when is a project manager or site super, somebody critical to this project, when are they at risk of leaving mid-project and therefore the project being at financial risk. And travel was the number one component. And so they said, yes, that means that ideally we're going to have people not traveling to these job sites, but of course that's not always feasible. And so very much the same thing, which was eyes wide open. If we're going to take on this project, which means that these people are traveling X distance, then we're going to put other measures in place and make sure that we're staying on top of how those team members are doing, so that we're not blindsided, essentially, if something happens and that team member were to leave. That's exactly what I've heard from different people that we've talked to around this same topic, or at least having that information front and center versus, having these things, people traveling, doing this, doing that, and not knowing about it.
I love it. That's a great answer. I'm looking at the clock and I think we're about at time. I just want to say thank you to everyone that was attending today, everyone that asked we got a lot of great questions. And of course, thank you so much to Lauren and to Peter for sharing their knowledge and expertise and experience. I think this is going to be one that we continue to kind of hear, the topic's not going away, but this gives us a really great starting point for continuing to build on a lot of this stuff. So thank you to both of you. Just a reminder that we will be sending an email with a link to the recording in the next day or two. And with that, everyone have a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much, Peter. This was
Thanks for
amazing.
having me. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Bye.